Welcome to The Gut Show. I'm your host, Erin Judge, registered dietitian and founder of Gutovate. I'm also your fellow IBS warrior. Our goal on this side of the internet is to empower those with IBS and digestive disorders to understand their gut better, to have a healthier relationship with their bodies, and to make confident choices to improve their digestive health. During this season, you can expect a conversation around a hot topic related to gut health, digestion, and IBS. As a disclaimer, I am a dietitian, but I am not your dietitian. So everything covered in this episode is meant to be educational and is purely information that you can take back to your healthcare team in order to make the best decisions for you. If you're new here and something just doesn't feel right in your gut, if your symptoms have led you to this podcast, I invite you to start by taking the quiz, What's Your Poop Personality? Your personality type will unveil what your symptoms may mean, what may be causing them, and what you can do about them. This is a free quiz and you can take it today at gutovate.com or find the direct link below in the show notes. While you're going to take the quiz, let's jump into today's episode. We are back for episode 2 of season 7. I'm really excited about today because we are going to talk about symptom tracking and logging and how to get the most out of this for your gut and for your gut symptoms. If you have IBS, if you have any other condition, if you're just dealing with symptoms and you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on, also trying to figure out what you're doing and if what you're doing is actually working and how to communicate that to providers, this episode is for you. We're going to talk about some of the resources that you may even have to implement some of these strategies. So with tracking and logging, what is the actual goal? The number one goal should be to understand what your body is communicating to you. We talked about this a little bit in episode 1 last week, but if you didn't listen to it or aren't putting that together yet, you have to know the communication your body is giving you. And sometimes you may think that you know it because you're listening to what's the loudest, but you may not know all the details of communication. Think about relationships in your life. If you only listen to what they say 25% of the time, or when they're yelling, or when they are more emotional, more driven, more reactive towards something, but you don't listen to anything else they say, you likely don't have a good relationship with them. You may not know how to best take care of them, how to best support them, or what they need, or even believe or think in the moment, right? The same is true of your body. And so with logging, this is a great opportunity to allow your body to communicate with you and to almost communicate back and really listen to what your body is saying. The second goal is to identify the patterns that then help you make sense of the symptoms you're experiencing, your triggers, and even discover what helps. When you are logging, you should be kind of checking in on the data you're collecting. And with that data, be able to sort of put together pieces with your patterns that help you understand the triggers, the symptoms themselves, and what's working or not. Sometimes this is best done with someone else, kind of monitoring that with you, because being in it every day can be really hard versus someone coming from the outside and evaluating that data you've kept can often put those pieces together. But you may be able to do this yourself as long as you are properly reflecting on what you track. And that should be a goal, is to find those patterns to make sense of some of those other pieces. The third goal is to assess how the changes you are making are working or are not working for you. Tracking is a fantastic way to assess change. There is rarely going to be a strategy or a tip or anything that you implement for your gut that's going to take you from 100 to 0, right? You're not going to have something that just completely cures every symptom that you have and makes everything go away all at once. It is rarely that obvious, unfortunately. Instead, what you typically are going to experience are small changes in symptoms, or you may see big changes in isolated symptoms, but not every symptom across the board. Tracking gives you the ability to see the small shifts, the small steps, the little things as they are becoming big things. This is going to help you understand if that change you made is helping, maybe if it's not helping, or if it's making you worse, without going into it more like a ping pong where it's It worked. Great. I'm going to keep it. It didn't work. I'm going to throw it out. You may need to build things together. So you may find that one strategy, maybe you added more fruit to your diet, and that might have helped a little bit with your symptoms. Maybe your stool is a little bit softer, but still not fully completely emptying. And so you keep the fruit and then you add in, toilet time and routines there. And now you find that you're having more complete bowel movements. Great, but you're still a little bit bloated. So maybe the next tip is that you incorporate some extra movement throughout the day, and that helps with your bloating, right? Like things are going to typically kind of work together and build off of each other. And logging, the goal is that the data that you collect helps you see that progress so that you can actively and can confidently add those things in and find a holistic plan that works really well for you. And then the fourth goal is to have information that you can share with your providers to support your care plan. You don't have to just hand them your log, but as you're keeping up with data, you can share through like your reflections and assessment of that data, some specific details with your providers. Sometimes seeing the actual data itself is so much more helpful than even you just answering a question that they have. Because even as a provider myself, I can ask great questions, but sometimes seeing what someone logs, like it sparks new questions and helps me really like see it. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm having a lot of diarrhea. Okay. But then to see your log and see that you're having 7 bowel movements a day with urgency, you're not eating during that period of time, you're highly stressed during that period of time, that showcases for me as a provider how intense this may be or the severity of it. Or you may say I have diarrhea and actually look at your log. I'm like, actually, I think you're constipated. And then we know what to evaluate. So it's helping make sense of what is going on and then communicating that to the providers so that they can use their knowledge and expertise to help guide you forward in a way that's going to work best for you. So those are our goals with tracking. The goal is sometimes accountability, but I find that accountability as a goal, and we see this a lot more in the weight loss world, isn't actually motivating long term or even necessary. I always think about logging sort of like training wheels when it comes to accountability, where in the short term they can help you like be aware, they can help you with consistency as you do find what works for you, but often you have to take those training wheels off for confidence, and they can't really keep you accountable forever. You want that internal cue and more intuition to guide you at that point, but for some people that may also fit in as a goal. The reason I included goals is because when you are starting to log and track, you have to have some intention behind it and a purpose behind it, because tracking without intention can be a waste of your time and your energy. This is really important to note because you have to have a plan for your reflection and how you assess the data that you collect to get the most out of it. And this is not a benign ask for you, meaning tracking can cause obsession. Tracking can cause you to feel even more present with the symptoms you experience, which can add more stress, which can be really emotionally exhausting. Tracking can also take the place, time wise, energy wise, of other strategies you could be implementing. Tracking is not just this simple thing, it can be a really big deal. And so you want to make sure if you're tracking that you're going to get something out of it and that you're not just doing it to do it with no reason and just completely wasting your time, your resources, your energy, and possibly even creating more stress, obsession, and disappointment that's going to be hard to get over to then find things that do work, right? And so making sure that you're tracking with intention, with some goals in mind, with a purpose in mind is going to be really helpful. So you've decided to track, you've got your purpose for tracking. What do you actually track? Like, what do you want to log? And I use logging and tracking interchangeably, but whatever you want to call the word, what do you want to keep up with? The first thing is your symptoms. And this is not just, I had symptoms today or I didn't, but what are the details around them? And that's going to help you best understand them. I usually will say log all bowel movements, even if you're having like 10, like log all of them if you can, and include details around those, including consistency, color, how complete it felt or not, how long it took, any other pain around it or not. Also, log other symptoms you experience and their severity. Some people find it helpful to have some sort of scale of like 1 to 5, and then you can note where you land on that with the symptom that day. It's really up to you how you want to do that. If you want to look at symptoms like bloating, gas, pain, if you're having like menstrual related symptoms, like note those, headache, nausea, vomiting, if that's present for you, any symptoms that are noteworthy, log those. Log your meals and your drinks. This is what most people are doing, which is great, but logging what you're eating, what you're drinking, what's coming into your body. You don't always need to do calorie counts or things like that. I would say to start, I wouldn't do that because that can get kind of messy. Or if you are logging that, maybe don't look at it for a while. I think those numbers can mess with us. And even apps that are out there, sometimes they give you these like recommendations or goals that can also mess with your goal and intention of logging in the first place. But it is helpful to have an idea of what are the foods, what are the ingredients coming in, what time do you eat, kind of what does that even look like? Understanding portions, which might be pictures, might be written words, whatever you need, but then drinks as well. A lot of people miss these. And sometimes it can help to keep up with all the ingredients. So if you go get a latte, what was in it? Like, did you put a sweetener in it or not? Like, what all was included, because that'll help you whenever you're trying to figure out like what is going on and what those connection points may be. In addition to those, make sure you're logging your sleep. If you're using an app, sometimes they connect to things like Fitbits, Apple Watches, these devices that track for you. Sleep usually integrates, and that's helpful. You could track it yourself by just knowing, okay, when did I go to bed? When did I wake up? But make sure you know, like, did I have a good sleep? Was I restless? Did I wake up a lot? Did I wake up feeling exhausted? Kind of note some things around sleep, especially at the beginning, to just see how that could be connected. Your movement and your exercise. Again, if you have a wearable, sometimes like steps and things will automatically connect. But if you don't have that, you can also just note walked a few times today, did this exercise at this time, and then definitely look at the time of it, duration, or any changes with exercise. Did you push your intensity? Did you focus on weights and slow exercise? Were you trying yoga or like more mindfulness based exercise? Were you running? Like, what were you doing? And then how did that time wise correlate to other symptoms that you experienced? Any supplements or medications, especially if there's some changes that are happening with those, including dose, and especially those supplements you may not think always about, enzymes, probiotics, gas X, whatever it may be. If you're taking it daily, like, make sure to note it and make sure you communicate that to providers as part of the overall data you share. Timing of those can be really helpful, but also those kind of as needed medications and supplements, ibuprofen, NSAIDs, those are very helpful to incorporate in your log because they can directly impact the gut.
Are you listening to today's episode with the main thought being, what are the steps that I can take to get rid of my symptoms right now? While I hope that the information that we share in every episode of The Gut Show leaves you feeling more empowered and more confident in your body, it's not always going to solve your problem or give you a clear direction for your specific symptoms and your needs. The Master Method membership is an online program for the person with chronic digestive symptoms and IBS who wants step-by-step guidance to understand their body, address the drivers of IBS, reduce symptoms, and build resilience in your gut long-term. This membership includes a step-by-step course and a dietitian-led community that teaches you how to holistically address each symptom and the IBS drivers, how to reduce symptoms more strategically and with confidence, and guidelines for better gut health long-term so that you're not only thinking about today, but you're also improving your outcomes in the future. It is time to ditch the symptoms and get your life back. The membership is your first step. You can learn more and enroll at ibsmastermethod.com and use the code GUTSHOW, GUTSHOW, GUTSHOW for $25 off your enrollment fee. Now, let's get back to today's episode.
And then significant changes in your stress levels. This is important because stress can have a huge impact. And I usually say just communicate what's noteworthy. So you got in a fight with your partner, you had a big meeting at work that didn't go well, you got stuck in traffic and you were panicking, something happened, maybe you had a really great moment, but you felt a lot of stress from that. Like, really note those really helpful things and kind of keep that correlated with your sleeping patterns and your food symptoms, all of that. And then any changes in your menstrual cycle, if that is applicable to you, hormone changes, even as a whole. This will also be helpful with understanding stress, but definitely symptoms. Symptoms can shift prior to menstruation, during menstruation, and during ovulation. And if you are a menstruating individual, you know that is most of the month if you have a regular cycle. So that's really helpful to know. And if you do have a cycle and you're not tracking your cycle, this is also helpful because irregularities in your cycle can be indicative of other things that overlap commonly with IBS and can contribute to similar symptoms. And so that's helpful just to note and be aware of, and also communicate again to your providers and your team. So you've got your tracking in place. How do you reflect? Because I've mentioned that it's not only important to collect the data, you also have to look at the data that you collect. That is the only way to understand patterns. Like collecting data is not just going to magically make something connect for you. Rarely. Sometimes it might. Typically, it doesn't. You actually have to look at it or have someone else looking at it for you. And so with your reflection period, you want to establish a time period that you're going to check in to the changes that you've made, or just check in on your progress. And at the beginning, even just check in to see what the patterns are. And then you want to see how any changes you've made have impacted your symptoms. This may be every 1 week, every 2 weeks. You'll see we have a tool, it's every 10 days. It just depends on what works best for you and even the change you're making. This might, change based on that. But you want to try to find some objective measures with your symptoms, or a way of looking at symptom patterns to see small changes, right? Because again, it's not going to be, well, I was still bloated, so my bloat didn't go away. But did your bloat lessen in your severity? And that's where I mentioned, keeping some sort of objective scale, maybe of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, that each day you can kind of give a mark to your symptom. That can be helpful. For you, it might be frequency of symptoms that you're looking at, which is an objective measure of, I'm looking at how many times I noted pain or discomfort, and that reduced or increased, something like that. It might be a specific characteristic of smell or texture of stool or something like that. But you do want to find some sort of objective measurement with your symptoms. And then whenever you're reflecting, you want to kind of take an average or look at how that objective measure shifted, because it may be that your bloating was at an 8, and then it went to a 7, and then slowly went down to a 6. So it's still present and significant, but you are noticing a downward trend. And so the things that you implemented are likely helping, and now you can add to it or keep that going and see if that continues to reduce that severity for you. This is really important. So that reflection period, it may be done yourself. You also may have a provider do this. And I said this last time, and I did mention I'm biased. We sell programs, we work with clients. So I understand my bias comes through, and I'm not just trying to sell you on our work, but I am, to be honest, like having someone else reflect for you and help kind of evaluate where things are going, ask you questions, be a team member with you, and then help understand what the next steps would be based on that is invaluable. A lot of my clients actually find that so helpful, where they don't feel like they're alone. They've got some validation. And because you're living with your symptoms, sometimes those small changes can be hard to see. And having someone call that out and then know what to do about it can be so, so helpful. So we do that. Dietitians tend to do that. Other providers do that. That can be helpful as well if you don't want to do this on your own. One thing that having someone else to help with can help prevent is obsession, because tracking can become obsessive. And I mentioned that towards the beginning. This is a bit of a fine line, and it may not always be good or bad that there's an increase in obsession with tracking. I tell clients often that sometimes this is going to be present, and like your obsession may get worse before we see results, and it might just be part of it because we need the data. And so understanding that obsession is likely going to happen, and it's okay. Sometimes that's all we need, is just the awareness of it. But for some people, especially if you have a history of an eating disorder where tracking and logging food became a form of control, if there's a trauma type of history or response, or even with some neurodivergence, this may be problematic or even helpful. And then those who struggle with certain conditions like obsessive compulsive disorder, this can actually be really difficult and challenging. And so if that is you, like you're not alone in that, and it can happen, and that's important to warn for. One thing I would say is if you're doing this alone and you notice obsession building, get help, get guidance, get a team member, get a coach, get someone on your side. That is going to help you the most. Another thing is to maybe take smaller breaks from logging or simplify it. So maybe instead of logging everything, you start to simplify to one or two factors that you're looking at and trying to measure. If you logged every ingredient, you're looking at calories, all of that. Maybe just take pictures of food or just simplify the meals. And then you can go back and add details if you need to. Find ways to make it a bit more simple for you so that you can ideally reduce some of that obsession. Another thing that can help a lot is coming back to the goal and the purpose, knowing that this should not be forever, right? This is not a forever thing. But coming back to the purpose of why you started to log in the first place. And typically that is, okay, I'm trying to better understand my body. I'm trying to, put these pieces together. Like this is part of the process. Those reminders can be really validating and even help kind of calm down that obsession a little bit. So everyone's going to have a different approach for this. I also do refer a lot to the therapists that my clients work with when this happens, just to develop some strategies around that or work through some of the thoughts behind it and kind of what's triggering that obsession and that feeling. That can be really helpful as well, just depending on what all's going on in your history. So, what are some of the resources that are out there for tracking? If you work with a provider, they may have a tool that they use. We have that in our practice that's connected to like our medical record and all of our like more secure platform. So, your provider may have this. There are also different apps available that you can get yourself. Bowel is an example of one. There are some on the market that are tailored towards digestive health. I recommend those if you can find them over things like MyFitnessPal, just because you'll be able to incorporate the symptoms more easily and all of the other factors. If you are using something like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, that gives you more of like a breakdown of calories and specific nutrients and things like that, and you're looking for that food database, look for features where you can maybe take notes and then log through there and kind of keep up with it so that you can still get some of those other details in there. But food alone is likely not going to help. So you do want to look at kind of that bigger picture and all those other details if you can get them. If you are a paper person and you like physical copies of a log, you like to use a pen, and apps might be a little bit obsessive for you as well. We do have an option called My Gut Journal. I created this many years ago whenever I started working with clients and found that they like some of the apps just weren't as helpful. And like I wanted something more streamlined that also had like all the details of what I needed as a practitioner. And so this can be really helpful. I have a how-to guide of how to utilize each form of tracking. So this is really great if you're kind of doing this on your own or just getting started. And then every day you'll have a brain side or mind side and a body side. And that includes some kind of mental health resources that I think can be really helpful, and how to set intentions there and goals that you're working towards. And then on the gut side and the body side, it has all those details that we mentioned, like sleep, stress, food, symptoms, any drinks, movement, supplements, menstrual status, if that's applicable, reflection periods for each day. And then every 10 days, there is a guided reflection section for you, both on the mind side and on the gut side. So I'll show you what that looks like, but it helps you kind of take your data that you have been working towards. So the mind side is more questions that you can answer in depth. But then on the gut side, you have like symptom scores that you're giving yourself and severity of those, number of bowel movements, kind of tracking where you're at there, things that you've learned, your takeaways, and then how to kind of adjust those or adjust your goals moving forward. So if this is something that would be helpful for you, we'll put it in the show notes. We ship kind of across the world, like it can be difficult in some countries to get it there, and the pricing obviously for shipping does increase. Ship these myself, but in the US we definitely ship those and can get them to you pretty quickly. So if you're interested in that, you have that as an option. And then if you're looking for what to do once you've gotten tracking in place, so if you're like, okay, great, I've got a baseline, but like what do I do now, because I don't know how certain factors I am tracking, how they could or could not contribute to symptoms. Like, I don't know how to make sense of it. and you don't have that guidance in place fully from a provider one-to-one, I really recommend that you join the Master Method membership. I am biased because it's my membership, but it is created to help you fill in those gaps. I teach you how to understand, like, even using this journal, but how to understand like different food characteristics and different habits, and even what to look for as a result, so that okay, this is the change I'm making. And then your tracking and logging is already in place, so you can actually monitor those shifts over time. That can be such a game changer and really helpful. And the membership is a virtual option, so you can literally sign up right away and get started as soon as you finish this podcast, which is pretty incredible. All of that is in the show notes for you if you're looking for those resources and if that would be helpful. Regardless of what resource you use next, I do hope that this episode was helpful to discuss tracking a little bit more, maybe gave you some ideas if you are starting this process, or if you've been tracking and logging and you're not really sure how to get the most out of it moving forward. Or maybe you just needed permission to let it go, or even just permission to start. I hope that this was helpful to start that conversation. Stick around. In the coming weeks, we have a lot of episodes for you. Next week, we're going to go over electrolyte powders and minerals, which is a big hot topic in the health space. But we have so much in store for you this season. So come back, stick around, subscribe to the channel so that you know when we have new episodes. And if this was helpful and you want to share the episode with a friend, join us on social media, share it in your stories, share what you learned, comment on the post that's related to it. All of that can be really helpful. And I would honestly just love to hear from you and hear your big takeaways and maybe how this helped you, which is the biggest gift that I could get as an online creator and educator. So I'll see you where I see you, and cheers to happy tracking.